You've seen it before. That one person who walks into the room, talking louder than everyone else. They joke. They shout. They dominate the space like a human megaphone. And for a moment, everyone looks. People laugh. Eyes turn. It seems like they've taken control. It feels like they've taken over. But wait. Keep watching. Keep listening. Because somewhere in that same room, maybe in the corner or quietly seated at the edge of the table, is someone else. Someone not talking, not rushing to speak. They're simply observing, listening, present, calm. They haven't said much. But when they do, everyone stops. Everyone listens. And just like that, you realize something no one teaches you in school. The loudest person isn't always a leader. Real leadership, real power, doesn't need noise. It doesn't scream. It doesn't seek attention. It draws it silently. Confident people know this. Magnetic people live this. They've learned that silence, used intentionally, is more commanding than volume, more persuasive than chatter, and far more lasting than a flood of words. But why? Why is the quiet person often the most powerful? Let's start with one core truth. People don't follow the noisiest person. They follow the one who makes them feel something. And silence, when combined with presence, makes people feel safe. It makes them feel seen. It makes them feel curious. Noise demands attention. Silence attracts it. Think of the most powerful characters in film or history. They aren't the ones who yell every sentence. They're the ones who speak rarely. But when they do, their words echo. Their voice is calm. Their timing is perfect. Their silence? Heavy, meaningful, intentional. This kind of presence doesn't come from volume. It comes from self-trust. You see, people talk too much when they're trying to prove something, when they're nervous, when they need approval, when they feel small and want to sound big. But truly powerful people don't need to fill the air. They're not afraid of silence, because they don't fear being misunderstood, ignored, or forgotten. Why? Because they know their energy says more than their voice ever could. Now, this doesn't mean silence is always better than speaking. But the relationship between the two is everything. Loud people often confuse dominance with leadership. But dominance without self-control is just noise with a mask. Leadership is something deeper. It's felt in your tone, your eye contact, your decisions, your pauses. It's the way you stand, the way you breathe, the way you carry stillness like it belongs to you. Let's go deeper. When someone is constantly talking, interrupting, and trying to own the space, what they're really saying is, please validate me. Please see me. Please agree with me. There's a desperation underneath, a fear of being invisible. But when someone speaks softly, confidently, even slowly, it's a signal that says, I don't need to rush. I don't need to fight for the spotlight. I am the spotlight. That contrast is unforgettable. So how do you become that person? How do you lead with silence and presence instead of volume and noise? It starts with retraining your instinct. In most situations, your first urge is to respond fast, to jump in, to fill space. Don't. Instead, pause. Let the silence sit. Breathe into it. Let others speak first. Let them reveal themselves. Then, when you do speak, speak with intention. Not to impress, but to express. Speak only when you have something worth saying. And when you speak, let your voice match your meaning. No rushing. No raising. Just presence. Remember this. Silence is not the absence of communication. It's the deepest form of it. It tells people you're not afraid to hold space. It shows people you're listening. It forces them to fill in the blanks with curiosity. It builds tension, mystery, respect. And that's why quiet people are often the most dangerous in a room. They're not broadcasting their strategy. They're reading the room. They're collecting data. They're conserving energy. And when they do speak, it feels like lightning. Precise. Sudden. Electrifying. In contrast, the loud person is easy to predict. You know their rhythm, their insecurities, their performance. It's all on the table. But the silent one, you don't know what they're thinking. And that unknown, that unreadability, makes them powerful. Let's be clear. Silence without confidence is awkward. Silence with confidence is unforgettable, and you can train that right now. You don't have to speak less forever, but you must learn the value of speaking less. You must understand that leadership begins with listening. That attention flows to those who don't chase it. So next time you walk into a room, don't try to dominate the air. Try to own your space. Ground yourself. Speak when you're ready. Let people lean into your calm instead of drowning in your noise. Let them feel your leadership before they hear it. Because the loudest person might get the first reaction, but the quiet one, they get remembered. And that's what real influence is. There's something different about a person who isn't in a rush to speak. Someone who listens more than they talk. Someone who doesn't interrupt, doesn't overshare, doesn't need to fill every silence with words. That person, they're magnetic, and everyone feels it. But why? Why does silence draw people in more than noise? Why do we lean closer when someone pauses, but tune out when someone rambles? Why does it feel like those who speak less somehow say more? The answer lies in how the human brain is wired. We're not just tuned into what people say. We're hypersensitive to how they make us feel. We're looking for safety, certainty, and status. And silence, when it's intentional, signals all three. When someone is calm enough to sit with silence, they seem powerful because they're not seeking approval. They're not proving anything. They're not desperate to be liked. And that confidence is rare. Rare things are valuable. And what's valuable becomes magnetic. Let's unpack that further. Most people chase attention. They speak quickly. They interrupt. They try to impress. They talk about themselves. They fill every space with sound. But that behavior, though common, is repellent. It makes people feel overwhelmed, unheard, and even suspicious. Now think of someone who's silent but present. They look at you directly. They're grounded. They're not performing. You feel their energy before they even speak. And when they finally do, every word lands like a stone dropped in still water. You remember it. That's not charisma by accident. That's power by restraint. Let's go deeper. Magnetism comes from contrast. In a world that's constantly loud, constantly pushing, constantly talking, silence becomes a contrast. It stands out. It makes people pause. It creates mystery. The human mind is drawn to what it can't fully read. If someone tells you everything about themselves in the first 5 minutes, there's no intrigue. There's no chase. But if someone reveals just enough and lets silence do the rest, your curiosity comes alive. That's the secret. Silence creates tension. Tension creates interest. Interest creates attraction. This applies in conversations, in relationships, in leadership, even in romance. People are attracted to calm energy, to those who don't need to prove their worth, to those who feel so rooted in themselves they don't panic when there's nothing to say. Here's a truth no one talks about. When you speak less, your presence speaks more. Your body language becomes clearer. Your eyes become stronger. Your gestures become more deliberate. Your energy becomes more focused. You move with intent. You breathe with control. And people notice. It's not about being cold. It's about being still. Stillness is not the absence of feeling. It's the mastery of it. Now, let's get practical. How do you become magnetic through silence? It starts with releasing the fear of being misunderstood. You don't need to explain everything. You don't need to justify your silence. Let people sit in their own interpretation of who you are. If they guess wrong, let them. The right people will feel your depth without needing a full broadcast. Second, practice intentional pausing. Don't rush your words. Let there be space between your thoughts. Not awkward silence. Confident silence. Silence that says, I trust myself. I trust this moment. Third, observe more than you react. Let others reveal themselves. Let them talk. People love to talk. And the more they talk, the more they trust the one who listens. And last, own your energy. Speak only when it adds value. Don't fill the air to be included. You are already in the moment, even in silence. People feel when you're not desperate to be seen. And that calm self-trust, that's the most magnetic force in the room. Silence also amplifies your words. Imagine someone who barely speaks. But when they do, they say something precise, something powerful. People don't just hear it, they feel it. Now compare that to someone who talks constantly. The more they speak, the less each word means. The more they push, the less they pull. When you become selective with your words, you increase their value. It's like turning your voice into currency. Speak only when you want to spend it wisely. And let's not forget the emotional side of silence. Sometimes, the most powerful way to connect with someone isn't through advice or storytelling. It's through presence. Sitting in a moment without trying to fix it, just being there. That silent empathy is unforgettable. It's rare, and it's deeply magnetic. So remember this. You don't need to be loud to be heard. You don't need to be the center of attention to be the center of gravity. You don't need to explain your worth to prove it. Speak less. Say more. Pause longer. Breathe slower. Trust the silence. Because when you stop chasing attention, it starts chasing you. And that is true magnetic power. Your brain is not just a machine that processes words. It's a pattern detection engine. It notices rhythm, tone, timing, movement. And above all, it notices contrast. The moment something unexpected happens, the brain lights up, and few things are more unexpected today than stillness. Stillness breaks the pattern. In a fast-paced, overstimulated world, we're constantly being pulled in different directions. Scrolling, watching, reacting, replying. Our brains are used to clutter, used to motion, used to noise. So what happens when you remove the noise? What happens when someone pauses, becomes still, and speaks only when it matters? Your brain stops. It pays attention. It leans in. This is no accident. It's biology. Let's break it down. The brain is wired for survival first, meaning second. When a person suddenly becomes still or silent, it sends a signal that something has changed. The brain can't ignore it. Silence is interpreted as a shift in energy. And the mind's natural response is, something's different. I need to tune in. This is called salience, the quality of standing out. Stillness becomes salient because it's rare, and the brain is drawn to the rare. In fact, studies in neuroscience have shown that moments of silence actually increase the brain's ability to process information. It's called the default mode network. When you pause, when there's space, your brain switches into a more reflective, self-aware mode. That's when real understanding happens. It's why people remember the pauses in a speech more than the speed of delivery. It's why a few calm, intentional words stick longer than a flood of shallow ones. Because the brain connects meaning not just what's said, but how it's delivered. Now, let's get more practical. Imagine two people talking. One is fast, animated, always filling space with movement and noise. The other is composed, calm. They speak slower. They let silence sit between ideas. Who do you trust more? Who feels more in control? Who makes you feel safer? Almost always, it's the calm one, the one who uses space intentionally, because their stillness is interpreted as certainty, as power, as someone who doesn't need to perform. Now, this isn't just about speaking. It's also about presence. When you walk into a room with stillness, when you're not jittery, not fidgeting, not broadcasting nervous energy, people's brains register that. Subconsciously, they think, this person feels grounded. I can relax around them. That reaction builds trust, connection, influence. Let's take this deeper. Stillness also affects how people feel around you. When your energy is calm and controlled, it creates a stabilizing effect on others. They mirror your rhythm. Their breathing slows. Their voice softens. Their mind clears. They stop rushing. They follow your pace. This is called emotional entrainment. When two people sync up emotionally and physically, and it often starts with a stiller, quieter person, the one who isn't reacting but responding, not pushing but pulling, not filling space but owning it. That's power. But what does space really mean in communication? Space is everything between the words. It's the pause before the point. It's the breath before the breakthrough. It's what makes your message land, stick, and echo. Think of music. If you remove the space between the notes, you lose a rhythm. It becomes noise. The same is true for speech. Without space, there's no tension. Without tension, there's no attention. Without attention, there's no influence. So how can you train your brain and others to respect your stillness? Start by practicing deliberate silence. Pause before you speak. Let the room breathe. Don't fill space out of habit. Fill with intention. Or don't fill it at all. Next, become aware of your physical stillness. Are you constantly moving your hands, tapping your foot, adjusting your posture? Train yourself to sit with presence, with rooted energy. That kind of stillness speaks volumes. It says, I'm not in fight or flight. I'm in control. Another way is to become the space creator in conversations. Instead of trying to be the loudest, be the one who holds space for others to speak. Be the one who listens without rushing to respond. This is a subtle but profound form of leadership. People remember how you make them feel. And when you create space for others, you give them the gift of feeling seen. That's rare. That's magnetic. And here's something even deeper. When you create space in your own mind through silence, breath, and awareness, you begin to hear your own voice again. Your real voice. Not the one trying to impress or please or dominate, but the one that already knows. Stillness connects you to that voice. And from there, your communication becomes effortless, clean, powerful, because it's no longer about proving anything. It's about sharing your center. In a noisy world, the most powerful person is the one who isn't afraid of quiet, the one who knows that space creates meaning. That stillness isn't weakness, it's presence, that the brain doesn't just hear words, it feels timing. So become the person who speaks with silence, lead with space, move with calm, and let every still moment remind the world. You don't need to say much to say everything. It takes courage to say less. Real courage, because most people believe confidence means being loud, expressive, dominant. They think the more they say, the more they're proving. But the truth is the opposite. Confidence is not an excess. Confidence isn't a restraint. Confidence is when you don't need to say much, because you know who you are. It's when you don't rush to explain, defend, or impress. You let your silence speak. You let your presence carry weight. And in that stillness, people feel something rare. They feel certainty. They feel depth. They feel you. Let's get something clear. Speaking less isn't about holding back value. It's about not wasting words. There's a difference between someone who's silent because they're scared and someone who's silent because they're solid, because they've already decided that their time, their energy, their voice isn't for everyone. It's for the moments that matter. This is the kind of confidence you can't fake. It's not bravado. It's not posturing. It's not performance. It's that deep, inner knowing that you don't need to dominate the space to own the room. And people sense it immediately. When someone says only what's necessary, we listen more closely. When someone doesn't chase validation, we want to give it to them. When someone doesn't overshare, we become curious. Silence becomes the invitation, and curiosity becomes the hook. There's a hidden strength in that. Because let's face it, most people overshare out of insecurity. They try to fill the silence, so no one sees how uncomfortable they are. But when you're grounded, when you're comfortable in your skin, silence isn't scary. It's natural. It's protective. It becomes a filter. The right people lean in. The wrong ones fade out. And that's the point. When you say less, you stop trying to manage how people see you. You give them space to project, to interpret, to wonder. And guess what? That mystery, it builds respect. It's a paradox. The less you say, the more seriously you're taken. The less you explain, the more credible you seem. The less you broadcast, the more powerful your presence becomes. But here's the key. This only works when your silence comes from a place of wholeness, not from fear, not from insecurity, but from fullness, from a place where you've already decided you don't need to prove your value. You simply express it when necessary, not for approval, but for impact. You don't need to fill every gap. You don't need to win every debate. You don't need to have the last word. You just need to know when to speak and when not to, because that moment you choose not to say something meaningless, that's when everything you say starts to mean something. Let me say that again. When you start choosing what not to say, you give power to everything you do say. This shows up in relationships, in business, in friendships, in conflict. The person who stays calm when things escalate, respected. The person who doesn't jump into gossip, drama, or petty talk, respected. The person who doesn't overexplain themselves to be understood, deeply respected. It's emotional discipline. It's the confidence to trust that not every moment needs your commentary. Sometimes, presence is enough. And in that presence, your energy does the talking. Your body language, your eye contact, your posture, your tone, all of it says, I'm not here to take up space. I am the space. So how do you develop this kind of silent confidence? You start by observing your urges. Notice when you want to speak just to be heard. Notice when you're explaining yourself too much. Notice when you feel the need to fill silence because it feels awkward. And then resist. Not forever. Just long enough to ask, is this really necessary? Ask yourself, am I speaking from power or from panic? This simple pause, this moment of restraint, rewires everything. You realize that not every emotion needs to become a sentence. Not every thought needs to be verbalized. Not every silence needs to be filled. In fact, every time you choose stillness over reaction, you build your inner strength. People start to feel that. And here's the beautiful thing. You don't need to announce your confidence. You embody it. You don't need to say, I'm confident. You say nothing and let people realize it for themselves. Because there's no louder statement than silence from someone who knows who they are. And in that silence, you're not empty. You're undeniable. There's a strange truth about human behavior, one that feels unfair but is undeniably real. The more you talk about yourself, the less powerful you seem. The more you explain, justify, expose, and confess, the more people start to shrink you in their mind. Even if your words are honest, even if your stories are impressive, even if your intentions are pure, when you give too much of yourself away too quickly, you lose something subtle but critical. You lose mystery. And mystery, whether in relationships, business, or influence, is power. Think of the last time someone you met shared everything right away. Their past, their pain, their dreams, their doubts, their needs. You listened, maybe even empathized, but a part of you began to withdraw. Why? Because deep down, you sensed they needed too much from you. You sensed exposure without boundaries, and it made them feel less respected. Now think of someone who only shares a little, just enough. Someone who reveals a sliver of their story, but leaves the rest for you to discover. Their silence isn't cold. It's composed. It doesn't beg for attention. It invites curiosity. And you find yourself leaning in, wanting more, respecting the restraint. That's what this chapter is about. Oversharing feels intimate, but often backfires. The psychology is simple. When you reveal too much too soon, people don't feel closer to you. They feel burdened. Because they didn't earn that level of access. They didn't ask for it. And in human nature, what is earned is valued. What is given away too easily is not. Now don't get me wrong. Vulnerability is not weakness. And openness, when offered at the right time, is beautiful. But there's a difference between real vulnerability and emotional dumping. There's a difference between honesty and exposure without discretion. Here's the truth. Not everyone deserves access to your story. Not everyone deserves to know your past, your wounds, your plans, your truth. That doesn't make you closed. That makes you wise. Because the more private you are, the more powerful your words become. Think of it this way. The less you reveal, the more impact each reveal has. That's how respect is built. Not by saying everything, but by choosing what not to say. It's the same reason we admire people who hold themselves with discipline. The athlete who doesn't boast. The CEO who doesn't explain every decision. The partner who doesn't constantly seek validation. These people are respected not because they're better than anyone, but because they seem anchored. They don't give everything away. And that control over what they share, when they share it, and how, that's magnetic. Let's bring this into the real world. In a conversation, if someone asks you a personal question, you don't have an answer immediately. You don't have to pour your heart out to earn connection. You can pause. You can say, I'll share that when the time's right. You can set a boundary with grace. And when you do, people often lean in, not back away, because boundaries create intrigue, and intrigue creates respect. It tells people you value your story. It tells them your experiences aren't cheap, that you don't need to be understood to feel whole, that you're not seeking therapy, you're choosing clarity. And that changes the dynamic. Oversharing often comes from a hidden place of fear. Fear of not being liked. Fear of rejection. Fear of being misunderstood. So people spill their whole heart out in hopes of being accepted. But here's the truth no one teaches you. When you like yourself, you don't need others to understand you. And when you trust yourself, you don't need to explain every part of who you are. You let time reveal what matters. You let action speak before stories. You speak when it builds connection, not when it tries to buy it. The people who overshare too fast often regret it later. They feel exposed. They feel judged. And often they were, because most people aren't equipped to hold that kind of emotional weight right away, especially when they haven't built trust with you yet. And trust takes time. It can't be forced. It has to grow in silence, in shared experience, in mutual energy. So the next time you feel the urge to tell everything, pause. Ask yourself, why do I want to say this? Is it for healing or approval? And if it's for approval, hold it. Let the moment pass. Let your stillness say, I am whole, even without being fully seen right now. You'll be surprised how powerful that feels. People respect what they can't fully read. People respect what doesn't ask for attention. People respect those who honor their privacy, not as a wall, but as a shield of self-respect. So share, yes, but share slowly. Share with care. Share when the other person has earned it. Because when your voice is rare, it's remembered. And when take a moment, look around you. Every space we enter, every platform we use, every second we exist in today's world is soaked in noise. Literal noise, digital noise, emotional noise. There's always something buzzing, pinging, talking, playing, scrolling, ringing. And if you pause, if you step away from it, even briefly, people start to wonder what's wrong. That's how far we've drifted. Silence used to be natural. Now it's suspicious. But why? Why are we so afraid of silence? Why do we fill every moment, every pause, every inch of space with sound? The truth is simple. Society has programmed us to fear stillness, to equate it with awkwardness, emptiness, weakness. We've been trained to believe that if you're not constantly doing something, saying something, posting something, you're falling behind. You're being left out. You're losing relevance. So we perform. We post more, talk more, respond instantly, think less, reflect less, listen less. And in that flood of motion, we lose our power. Silence is not awkward. It's ancient. It's how the world began. It's how the mind rests. It's where truth lives. But silence makes people uncomfortable because it reveals things. It reveals anxiety. It reveals insecurity. It reveals how much noise we use to hide from ourselves. The moment you turn off the music, the podcast, the background TV, suddenly your thoughts are louder. The silence acts like a mirror. It reflects your state back to you. And for many people, that's terrifying. So instead of facing it, they run from it, into the next conversation, the next scroll, the next distraction, not because they're curious, but because they're escaping. And society has monetized that escape. We're in a world that profits from your attention. It's built to keep you stimulated, reactive, noisy. Because a quiet mind is harder to sell to. A quiet person is harder to manipulate. A calm presence doesn't buy out of impulse. So, of course, silence becomes the enemy. You probably felt this in social situations, too. You're in a conversation. There's a pause. And instead of letting it breathe, someone panics and rushes to fill it with a joke or a random topic. Why? Because silence makes people feel exposed. And no one wants to feel exposed in a world that's always watching. But here's the truth. Silence isn't a gap. It's a presence. It doesn't mean nothing is happening. It means something deeper is happening. The most powerful moments in music are the pauses, the rest between notes, the breath before the chorus drops. In the same way, Powerful communication lives in the space between words. But most people never give themselves a chance to experience it. They're too busy trying to sound smart, be likable, stay relevant. And in doing so, they exhaust their own voice. Their energy becomes noise. Their presence becomes forgettable. So, how do you reclaim your relationship with silence? How do you stop fearing it and start using it? It begins with one small but revolutionary act. Practice being silent on purpose, not as a punishment, not as a retreat, but as a choice. Start by creating space in your day where you do nothing but breathe. No phone, no music, just you and the silence. Let the discomfort rise. Let the noise inside you settle. What you'll find is that the silence isn't empty. It's full of signals, thoughts, feelings, insights. It's the place where your real voice begins to surface. And when you learn to be still with yourself, you stop rushing to fill space with others. You start to speak from a deeper place. You become the person who isn't afraid of the quiet in conversations, the one who lets others talk first, the one who doesn't jump to respond, but pauses and speaks with calm clarity. That presence is unforgettable and rare because everyone else is performing. You're just being. You're not pushing. You're not chasing. You're letting your silence create gravity, and people feel it. Here's the secret. The more comfortable you are with silence, the more powerful your word become, because you've shown yourself that your value doesn't come from constant output. It comes from inner alignment. You don't speak to fill silence. You speak to fill meaning. So let society chase noise. Let the world fill every pause with chatter. You'll pause. You'll breathe. You'll speak only when ready. You'll listen without needing to interrupt. You'll be the calm in the storm. And in a world that fears silence, you'll be the one who owns it. There's a moment, a split-second shift that happens the instant you enter a room. Before you say anything, before you smile, before you shake a hand. People notice something. It's not your clothes, not your title, not your words. It's your presence. That subtle, invisible signal you carry with you everywhere. Some call it energy. Some call it aura. Others call it vibe. But whatever word you use, it's real and it's powerful. Because here's the truth. People feel you before they hear you. And if you know how to control that energy, to command it, you can walk into any space and own it without saying a single word. So let's break this down. First, understand what most people do when they enter a room. They look around nervously. Their eyes dart. Their shoulders hunch. Their steps are hesitant. They seek permission. They scan for approval. And their body leaks one message. Am I allowed to be here? Now, think of someone who walks in differently. They move with calm intention. Their steps are slow but grounded. They don't scan the room. They observe it. They don't look for approval. They assume their place. And instantly, everyone else starts reacting to them. That's power, silent power. And it doesn't come from ego. It comes from alignment. Owning a room without speaking starts long before the room. It starts with how you walk, how you stand, how you breathe. Let's get practical. Before you enter any space, pause. Feel your feet on the ground. Breathe deeply. Slow everything down. No rush, no pressure, just presence. Straighten your spine, not to appear big, but to feel connected. Then walk in like the room is already yours. Not because you think you're better than anyone, but because you're not competing with anyone. You're just fully there. People can't look away from that kind of calm. They can't ignore someone who doesn't need attention to have influence. And here's the key. Never be the first to speak just to fill silence. Let others approach you. Let others wonder about your energy. And when you do speak, let your voice match your stillness. No rushing, no apologizing, no shrinking, just clean, calm clarity. Remember, people are constantly scanning for social cues. They're asking themselves, who seems in control? And it's not the loudest person. It's not the one telling jokes or commanding attention. It's the one who seems untouched by the need to prove anything. That's you. You walk into a room, and your energy says, I know who I am. I don't need permission to be present. I don't need to dominate to be respected. I'm here and that's enough. Let's go deeper. Your presence is not in your posture alone. It's in your eyes. Do you meet someone's gaze with stillness? Or do you dart your eyes, looking down, looking away? Your eye contact should be soft, not aggressive. Focus, not searching. It should say, I see you, but I'm not trying to get anything from you. That neutrality is attractive. It doesn't pull. It holds. And the best part? You don't need to say much, because your silence becomes a conversation. Here's something else most people miss. People mirror your state. If you're tense, they feel tension. If you're calm, they calm down. If you walk into a room anchored, everyone else starts to find their own ground too. That's leadership without a single word. And finally, your stillness is a boundary. It says, I am not easily moved. I am not easily shaken. You can speak, but you won't pull me off center. People trust that energy, because in a world full of noise, someone who is unbothered stands out. So from now on, don't walk into a room trying to be seen. Walk into a room as if you already belong, because you do. No overthinking, no adjusting, no shrinking. Just you, breathing deeply, moving slowly, seeing clearly. That's how you own a room. You've heard it before. Timing is everything. But in powerful communication, it's more than just timing. It's the space between the timing that matters. It's the pause. That tiny, deliberate moment of silence, before or after a sentence, that holds more tension, more meaning, more magnetic force than words ever could. A pause is not an absence of speech. It's a tool, a sharp one. A pause creates weight. It draws attention. It gives your words room to land. And it lets your audience not just hear, but feel what you're saying. Let's say you're in a conversation. You're explaining something important. Now imagine instead of rushing from one idea to the next, you pause. You let a second of silence stretch before your next line. What happens? The room shifts. People lean in. They stop thinking of what they're going to say next, and they start listening, really listening. Because the pause signals one thing. What I'm about to say matters. This is the secret of magnetic speakers, charismatic leaders, and unforgettable storytellers. They don't rush. They don't fear the silence. In fact, they use it. Now here's something most people miss. We live in a world that's addicted to filling space. There's this pressure, this false idea, that silence is awkward, that it means you don't know what to say. So people rush, fumble, fill gaps with like, and in doing so, they dilute their message. But when you pause, something else happens. You create anticipation. And anticipation is emotional gold. It builds tension. It builds curiosity. And most importantly, it builds belief. Because if you can pause before speaking, it means you're not chasing approval. You're anchored in your message. Think of some of the most powerful speeches in history. Martin Luther King didn't rush through, I have a dream. He paced it. He breathed through it. He let the silence shape the message. Every pause was a signal. Let that sink in. That's how you create moments, not just messages. Now let's talk about conversations, not just speeches. In everyday communication, pausing does three magical things. First, it shows confidence. You're not in a hurry. You're comfortable enough to let your words breathe. Second, it gives the listener time to catch up, to process, to feel. And third, it builds rhythm. Rhythm is what makes communication feel alive. Without pauses, everything becomes a blur. With them, you create emotional pacing, like beats in a song. But the real magic? It's in the unexpected pause. When someone's ranting, and you calmly say nothing for a beat longer than expected. When someone's waiting for your answer, and you let silence answer first. When someone asks something deep, and instead of responding immediately, you pause and then speak. That silence doesn't just show thoughtfulness. It amplifies your presence. Because people remember what stands out, and silence stands out. Here's something that takes it even further. A well-placed pause can communicate more than the perfect sentence ever will. Let's say someone makes a passive-aggressive comment. You don't need to fire back. You don't even need to speak. Just pause. Look, Let the silence stretch. That silence says, I saw that. I'm not reacting, but I'm not ignoring it either. It holds more dignity than a comeback, because silence, when intentional, always communicates control. But remember, this isn't about becoming quiet all the time. This is about strategic contrast. It's about knowing when to speak and when to let the silence hold a room for you. So, how do you practice this? Start small. Next time you speak, insert one intentional pause after a powerful sentence, or pause before responding. Even when you know what to say, breathe before you begin. Breathe when you finish. Feel the silence. Don't rush through it. Let it do the work for you, because in that moment of stillness, your message expands. In that pause, you're no longer just speaking, you're leading. And in a world full of noise, people don't remember who talked the most. They remember who made them feel something. And often, it was the one who dared to pause. We've all been there. The moment you walk into a conversation, an interview, a date, a meeting, and your mind kicks into gear. How do I sound smart? How do I look confident? How do I make them like me? You start adjusting your tone, choosing your words too carefully, laughing too loud, talking too much. You're performing, and it's exhausting. But the truth is, people don't remember what you said nearly as much as how you made them feel. And the way to make people feel something meaningful isn't by performing. It's by being present. Presence over performance. Always. Let's get clear on what this means. Performance is when you're trying to win people. Presence is when you've already accepted yourself. Performance chases approval. Presence radiates security. And here's the shift. The moment you stop trying to impress others, they start being impressed. Why? Because presence creates safety. Let me explain. We live in a world where most people are anxious, distracted, or guarded. They're used to being judged, talked over, misunderstood. So when someone comes along who isn't pushing, isn't rushing, isn't trying to dominate the space, but instead is calm, attentive, grounded, it changes everything. They relax. They breathe easier. They feel seen without being analyzed. And that makes you unforgettable. Because real presence is rare. It's rare to be with someone who's not thinking about their next move. Someone who's not trying to impress, prove, or posture. Someone who's just here, right now, with you. That kind of presence is magnetic. It says, you're safe with me. I'm not trying to perform. I'm just being me. And that's the kind of energy people come back to. Here's something powerful to remember. People don't always want to be wowed, but they always want to feel safe. Emotional safety isn't loud. It's subtle. It's in your calm eye contact, your unhurried responses, your non-reactive listening, your ability to be with someone without trying to fix, advise, or entertain them. Most people don't realize how rare that is. They think being charismatic means being exciting, clever, charming. But real charisma comes from stillness, from presence, from listening with your whole body, from letting silence stretch without needing to fill it, from allowing space to exist so someone else can exist inside it with you. That's what makes people feel held. That's what builds trust. So how do you stop performing and start being present? You start with breath. Before entering a conversation, take a slow inhale. Ground yourself. Let go of the need to impress. Remind yourself, I don't need to prove anything. My presence is enough. Next, focus fully on the person in front of you. Not what you're going to say. Not how you look. Not how you're being perceived. Just them. Let your attention become a gift. Because in a world starving for real connection, nothing is more valuable than undivided attention. And finally, allow silence. Don't be afraid of pauses. Don't jump into rescue awkward moments. Let the conversation breathe. Let the other person speak without interruption. Let your energy say, you're not being rushed. You're not being judged. You're safe here. That's when people open up. That's when real trust begins. And guess what? That trust turns into attraction. That trust turns into influence. That trust turns into loyalty. Not because you performed, but because you showed up fully. So stop trying to be interesting. Start being interested. Stop trying to impress. Start making people feel safe. Because presence is louder than performance. And in the silence between your words, in the calm of your being, you send a message that everyone longs to hear. You don't have to try so hard around me. In a loud world, we're taught that volume equals power. Speak louder. Make noise. Dominate the space. Be the biggest voice in the room if you want to be taken seriously. But that's a lie. One of the most dangerous, widespread lies in communication. Because true authority isn't loud. It's quiet. It doesn't need to raise its voice. It doesn't need to shout to be heard. It speaks with calm certainty and people listen. You've met people like this. Maybe it was a teacher, a mentor, a leader. They didn't bark orders. They didn't overwhelm you with words. They spoke softly, but when they did, you felt the weight behind every sentence. You leaned in, not because they demanded attention, but because they commanded it. There's a difference, and it changes everything. The quiet voice carries weight because it doesn't fight for space. It trusts the room to come to it. That's not just confidence. That's mastery. Let's go deeper. When someone yells, it often signals desperation, a need to be heard, a fear of being overlooked. But when someone lowers their voice, slows their rhythm, and speaks from stillness, they communicate strength. They don't need you to listen, but you do anyway, because you can't ignore the energy behind the calm. That's the paradox. The softer the voice, the deeper it echoes. But let's be real, this kind of communication requires discipline. It requires self-trust. It means choosing stillness when the room is chaotic. It means choosing simplicity when others are performing. It means choosing calm when everything in you wants to speak louder to prove something. You want real-world proof? Watch how high-level negotiators work. Watch how elite therapists guide a conversation. Watch how the most respected leaders speak during a crisis. They don't yell. They don't ramble. They don't crowd the moment. They speak slowly, clearly, quietly, and everyone listens because power doesn't need to announce itself. It simply is. Here's something no one tells you. Your energy enters a conversation before your voice ever does. So when you speak with a quiet voice but grounded presence, your message lands twice. Once through your words, once through your energy. And people feel both. This is why silence, once again, plays a critical role. When you pair a soft voice with strategic pauses, something incredible happens. Your words become irresistible. People don't just hear you. They feel drawn to you. Because the softness breaks the pattern. It cuts through the noise. And it makes every sentence feel intentional, not accidental. But here's the key. You can't fake this. You can't whisper with the same urgency as yelling. You have to believe in the power of your words. Because the authority of a quiet voice doesn't come from tone alone. It comes from inner alignment. When you believe what you say, when you're grounded in who you are, when you speak without needing to convince, that's when your voice, no matter how soft, becomes undeniable. You're not loud, but you're clear. You're not forceful, but you're firm. You're not dominant, but you're centered. And that energy shifts the room. So, how do you cultivate this? Start by slowing down. Practice speaking in a lower tone. Not quieter to hide, but quieter to focus. Let your sentences breathe. Let your pauses hold space. And when you speak, don't try to sound powerful. Just be present. Fully. Because presence is what amplifies your voice, not volume. And remember, people trust calm. People follow calm. People feel safe with calm. So when you stop trying to be loud and start choosing to be grounded, you unlock a whole new level of respect. You become the person who doesn't need to compete for attention. You become the voice people seek out. And in a world that screams for significance, you'll be the quiet force that moves everything. In most rooms, the loudest person is often assumed to be the most dominant. They lead the conversation, tell the stories, throw out the jokes, and take up space. People laugh, nod, listen. But here's the truth. The person who's truly in control is rarely the one doing all the talking. It's the one who's listening. Silently, intentionally, patiently. Because listening, real listening, is a power move. Why? Because while everyone else is trying to be heard, the listener is learning. While others are reacting, The listener is reading. While everyone is speaking to impress, the listener is watching patterns, catching details, hearing what others miss. And that makes them dangerous in the best way. Listening puts you in control without looking controlling. You're not asserting power. You're absorbing it, quietly, calmly, strategically. And that's why the silent one always knows more. They don't interrupt. They don't compete for airtime. They don't need to, because they're gathering everything they need through observation. Let's break this down further. Most people don't listen to understand. They listen to reply. Their brain is already forming a response while you're still mid-sentence. They miss tone. They miss cues. They miss emotion because they're stuck in their own head. But the person who listens without trying to perform, they win because they hear the spaces between the words, the unspoken, the contradictions, the truth behind the posture, the insecurity behind the arrogance, the honesty buried in hesitation. They see everything because they're not busy trying to be seen. Now, let's be clear. Listening isn't just about being quiet. That's passive. Real listening is active. You're absorbing, tracking, reading, tuning into body language, watching for microexpressions, feeling energy shifts, listening not just with ears, but with your entire presence. And this makes you formidable. In relationships, it builds trust. In business, it gives you leverage. In conflict, it gives you strategy. Because while others reveal their hand, talking too much, defending, overexplaining, you're sitting back, taking mental notes. And when you do speak, your words cut deeper, because they're laced with understanding. People listen to those who listen to them first. Listening earns you influence. It makes others feel seen, without you needing to prove anything. That's leadership. That's charisma. That's power. Let's take this even further. Listening gives you time. Time to choose your words. Time to let emotions cool. Time to decide if something even needs to be said. Because not every comment deserves a response. Not every jab deserves a comeback. Sometimes silence is a statement. You simply observe. And in that observation, you maintain the high ground. You don't fall into emotional traps. You don't reveal your thinking too soon. You keep control not through force, but through awareness. People don't expect that. They're used to ego battles, loud voices, fast responses. When you stay quiet and watch, it unsettles them. And when you finally speak, your voice carries 10 times the weight. That's how the silent one always ends up ahead. Not because they know more facts, but because they noticed more truth. They saw what others missed, because they listened. So how do you develop this? Practice full presence. In your next conversation, don't think about what to say. Think about what's really being said. Watch tone. Watch pacing. Watch eye contact. Ask yourself, what's behind their words? And don't rush to speak. Let them finish fully. Then respond, not to impress, but to reflect what you actually heard. People will be shocked. They'll feel understood on a level they're not used to. And they'll trust you more, respect you more, open up to you more, all because you listened. So remember this, the one who listens learns. The one who listens leads. The one who listens wins. Because in a noisy world, the quietest person in the room is often the smartest. And the one who listens with stillness always sees more. We've been taught to believe that saying more means knowing more, that more words equal more intelligence, that the best communicators speak at length. But the opposite is often true. The most powerful people in any room are the ones who say the least and still command the most attention. Why? Because every word carries weight. And the fewer you use, the more powerful each one becomes. This is the art of minimal words with maximum impact. It's not about being brief just to be brief. It's about being deliberate. You speak when it matters. You stop when the point is made. You remove the fluff, the fillers, the overexplaining, and what's left is substance. Clean, sharp, memorable. Think about it. When someone rambles, you tune out. When someone is always talking, their words become background noise. But when someone speaks rarely, and when they do, it's clear, direct, and meaningful, you listen. Everyone does. It's the same principle in writing, in storytelling, in music, in leadership. Impact is not about volume. It's about precision. Here's a secret. People respect those who don't overtalk because it signals security. It says, I don't need to keep proving myself. It shows you're comfortable with silence. You don't fear gaps. You don't feel the urge to fill every moment. You let your presence, your clarity, your essence do the talking. That's rare, and it's magnetic. Let's look at how to master this. First, slow down your speech. Let your words settle before adding more. Don't be afraid of a pause. It gives the listener a chance to absorb what you said, and it gives you the space to decide if more needs to be said at all. Second, strip your sentences. Take out the fillers. The like, do you know, the just. These soften your authority. Say what you mean and stop there. The pause that follows often says more than another sentence ever could. Third, speak in headlines. Think about how you can deliver the core of your thought in a single, clear line. Something that lands. Something that echoes. A sentence that makes people stop and feel. Great communicators are not just speakers. They're editors. They cut away the excess. They know that every extra word dilutes the message. They choose their language the way a sculptor chooses a chisel, with purpose. But here's what really makes this work. You have to believe that less is enough. If you say one short sentence and then feel nervous silence will make you look weak, you'll rush to fill it. And that kills the magic. The real impact only lands if you let it breathe. If someone asks you a deep question and you respond with 6 words, own that. Let it hang in the air. Don't fidget. Don't explain. Your stillness backs up your sentence. And that's where true weight is felt. Think of quotes that have lasted for centuries. They're short. They're simple. They hit you right in the chest because they don't waste energy. That's what you're aiming for. Now let's go deeper. Saying less also puts the spotlight on the listener. It gives them space to respond, reflect, and engage. You're not crowding them with your thoughts. You're offering something sharp, clear, and real, and letting them walk into it. This creates connection. It shows respect. It builds trust. People don't want to be talked at. They want to be spoken to with intention. And you do that not by saying more, but by saying what matters. So from now on, ask yourself before speaking, is this sentence necessary? Is it clean? Is it meaningful? And when it is, say it, then stop. Let the silence do the rest. That's when your words begin to carry a different weight. That's when people start to quote you. That's when your voice leaves echoes instead of noise. So remember, in a world obsessed with talking, those who say less but say it well win. In every conversation, there's a rhythm, a beat, a flow, and most people don't even realize they're dancing to someone else's tempo. They rush because the other person is rushing. They speed up their sentences to keep up. They let the tone of the room control their pace. But the moment you realize this, you gain leverage. Because power is not just in what you say. It's in the tempo you bring. Slow down and you take control. Let's be clear. Slowing down isn't about dragging your words. It's not lethargy. It's intentional pace. It's confidence in your delivery. It's trusting that your words will land without rushing to get to the end. When you control the tempo, 3 things happen. First, you regulate the room. People sync to your rhythm. They mirror your tone. If you're calm, they calm down. If you slow, they slow too. It's neurological. Humans subconsciously mirror what feels stable. So if your speech is rooted, unhurried, composed, others will meet you there. Second, you gain time. Time to think. Time to notice. Time to read the space. Most communication errors happen because people are too fast to react. They speak before the full message is clear. They miss emotional cues. They interrupt. But when you slow down, you see everything. You catch that micro-expression. You hear the tone behind the words. You sense the shift in energy before it becomes conflict. That awareness is power. And third, slowing down makes your words hit harder. Because now there's weight. There's space. There's intention. Each sentence has room to breathe. Each idea lands with clarity. You stop sounding like you're trying to get approval and start sounding like you already have it. Here's what most people don't get. Fast talkers don't sound smarter. They sound anxious. Slowness, when controlled, signals mastery. Think of a surgeon. Calm hands. Steady breath. Think of a commander. Measured voice. No rush. Think of the person you trust most. They don't ramble. They don't rush. They pace their message because they know it matters. You can do this too, but it takes awareness. Start by watching your default pace. Do you talk fast when nervous? Do you speed up to fill silences? Do you rush to prove you know what you're talking about? Catch it. Interrupt it. Then breathe. One deep breath before you speak changes everything. Let the breath create space. Speak your sentence, and then pause. Don't fear the space between thoughts. Own it, because that pause isn't awkward. It's powerful. It lets your message settle. It tells the listener, this part matters. Listen closely. And they will. Let's take it further. Slowing down also changes your internal state. It calms your nerves. It centers your mind. It grounds your energy. And grounded energy is felt by everyone around you. When you speak slowly and with clarity, people feel safer with you. They trust that you're in control, not just of your words, but of your emotions, your thoughts, your presence. That trust is what influence is made of. Now, here's something subtle but life-changing. Controlling your tempo also helps in conflict. When others raise their voice, speed up, get defensive, you do the opposite. You slow down even more. You speak clearly. You don't match chaos. You stabilize it. And suddenly, the dynamic shifts. You're no longer reacting. You're leading. And people follow those who create rhythm, not noise. So from this point on, speak like someone who knows their words matter. Breathe between sentences. Pause after the point is made. Let silence finish your thoughts. And most importantly, own your tempo. Because when you control the rhythm, you control the room. And when you slow down, your influence accelerates. We live in a world obsessed with movement. Hustle, activity, noise. People rush to speak, to post, to prove they exist. But there's a hidden power most never tap into. It's the opposite of doing more. It's the art of doing less with intention. Stillness. Stillness isn't weakness. It's not passivity. It's not being checked out. True stillness is awareness without reaction. It's presence without performance. It's choosing to be unmoved while the world keeps spinning. And it carries weight because it's rare. Stillness is what makes a person feel anchored. You felt it. You've been around someone who didn't flinch, didn't rush, didn't fidget. Their body calm, their eyes steady, their breath slow. And somehow, without saying much, they dominated the room. That's presence. Not because they did something, but because they didn't. In a world addicted to motion, stillness stands out. Let's explore why. When you're still, you're fully present. You're not mentally racing ahead. You're not scanning for reactions. You're not trying to impress. You're here. And when you're fully here, people feel it. They feel safe. They feel focused. They feel seen. Stillness also creates contrast. When everyone is trying to be the loudest, the funniest, the smartest, the person who just is becomes the most powerful because they don't need to chase. They don't need to prove. Their calm becomes a mirror, and others start to see themselves more clearly in that space. Here's something deeper. Stillness communicates emotional control. It says, you can't rattle me. It says, I won't be pulled into your chaos. It says, I lead from within, not from reaction. That kind of control earns respect because we all crave stability, especially in uncertain situations. So when you're the still one, when your energy doesn't spike under pressure, you become the emotional center of the room, and people gravitate to you. Let's make this practical. Start by becoming aware of your body. Notice the habits. Bouncing your leg, tapping your fingers, shifting your weight, darting your eyes. These micro movements leak insecurity. They say, I'm uncomfortable. I'm trying to manage this moment. Now imagine removing all of that. You're sitting or standing, straight spine, relaxed shoulders, soft gaze. You're not frozen. You're grounded. That stillness sends a powerful message. I'm not in a rush. I'm not here to chase attention. I am the attention. And it changes everything. Now, in conversation, stillness amplifies listening. When you're not thinking about your next move, you actually hear people. You hear their words. You hear their tone. You hear what they're not saying. And when you finally do speak, it's coming from a place of depth, not reaction. That's when your words start to land. Because you weren't just waiting to talk. You were receiving the room before you responded. Here's something powerful to try. The next time you're asked a question, pause. Breathe. Don't rush to fill the gap. Let the silence stretch, just enough to feel it. Then speak slowly, with clarity. Your stillness in that moment will say more than the answer itself. And over time, people will start to feel something different about you. They won't always be able to name it, but they'll feel more calm around you, more focused, more present, because your energy sets the tone, not your words, your presence. So remember this, motion doesn't equal meaning. Noise doesn't equal value. And doing more doesn't always create more impact. Sometimes it's the pause that makes a sentence powerful. Sometimes it's the silence that gives the voice its weight. And sometimes the person who does the least commands the most respect. So don't be afraid of stillness. Train it, liven it, because the less you do, the more you are. Most people speak to be heard. Some speak to be understood. But far too many speak just to be right. And that's where things fall apart. Because when your goal is to be right, you stop listening. You stop connecting. You stop communicating. What you're really doing is protecting your ego, disguised as conversation. But here's a quiet truth that powerful communicators understand. You don't need to be right to be respected. You don't need to win the argument to win someone's trust. You don't need to prove you're correct to prove your value. In fact, the more detached you are from the need to be right, the more impact your words will carry. Because people don't want to feel defeated. They want to feel heard. Let that sink in. When you speak from ego, every disagreement feels like an attack. You get defensive. You interrupt. You raise your voice. You start reaching, not for truth, but for victory. But when you detach your identity from your opinions, something shifts. You no longer fear being wrong. You become curious instead of reactive. You stay calm instead of combative. And the conversation becomes a bridge, not a battleground. That's where real communication begins. Let's break this down. When your ego is tied to your words, every challenge feels personal. But when your presence is grounded, you realize your thoughts are not your worth. Your beliefs are not your identity. You can change your mind and still be strong. You can say, I don't know, and still be confident. You can say you're right and still be respected. In fact, that humility builds more trust than stubborn certainty ever could. Here's something powerful to remember. People feel safe around those who don't need to win, because it means the space is open. It means the conversation can breathe. It means they won't be punished for thinking differently. That's the kind of presence people gravitate to. So how do you speak without ego? First, slow down. Pause before responding, especially when emotions rise. Ask yourself, am I speaking to understand or to defend? Second, validate before you correct. Acknowledge the other person's point before offering your own. Not to manipulate, but to connect. Because people lower their guard when they feel seen. Third, let go of the need to finish every argument. You don't always have to have the last word. You don't have to convince everyone you meet. You're not there to prove something. You're there to communicate. Clearly, calmly, with presence. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is, that's an interesting point. I hadn't thought of it that way. That sentence alone can disarm tension, because it shows you're rooted enough to consider new angles. And that's rare, but it's not weakness. It's maturity. It's inner strength. It's leadership. Let's be honest. People remember how you made them feel, not how many points you scored. If your words come from insecurity, even the smartest sentence will land hollow. But if your words come from grounded presence, even a quiet response can carry authority. So speak without the armor. Speak with curiosity. Speak with humility. And know this, you don't have to be right to be respected. You don't have to speak louder to be heard. And you don't have to win every argument to have a voice that matters. Detach ego from your voice, and your message will rise without force. That's real power. That's silent strength. That's the kind of presence people feel long after the words are gone. Words matter, but timing matters more. You can say the perfect thing at the wrong moment and lose everything. And you can say something simple at the right moment and change someone's life. That's the power of timing. But in a world addicted to instant replies and constant noise, timing has become a lost art. Most people don't wait. They don't listen. They speak too soon, or they hold back too long. They miss the moment. The wise don't. The wise know that when you speak is just as important as what you say, and that sometimes the most powerful move is to stay silent. Let's go deeper. Silence, used well, is not hesitation. It's strategy. In conflict, silence disarms aggression. In emotion, silence gives space for clarity. In connection, silence allows depth. But this requires discipline, because silence can feel uncomfortable. It can feel like a void that needs filling. But here's what most never realize. The person who can sit in silence the longest owns the room. They don't break it with nervous words. They don't speak just to escape the tension. They wait and they watch. They let others reveal more. They hold the space. And when they do speak, it lands. It lands because people are waiting for it. It lands because it's anchored in presence, not panic. It lands because silence framed it. Now, let's talk about the other side, knowing when to speak. Not to fill air, but to move energy, to break confusion, to offer truth, to hold someone steady. That's when your voice becomes medicine. But only if you've listened first. Only if you felt the room. Only if your words are timed, not just spoken. Let's look at some practical signals. If someone is venting, don't interrupt with advice. They don't want logic. They want space. If a room is heavy, don't rush to lighten the mood. Let the gravity speak first. If someone's silent, don't fill the space for them. Let their silence teach you something. Your job is not to fix every silence. It's to understand it, because every silence holds meaning. Sometimes it's a pause for breath. Sometimes it's pain with no words yet. Sometimes it's wisdom forming. If you speak too soon, you crush it. If you wait too long, you miss it. But if you listen deeply, you'll know when it's time. And that's what makes your voice powerful. It's not always present, but when it arrives, it's right. It's not constant, but it's consistent in value. Let's take this further. Timing also means knowing what doesn't need to be said. Not every truth has to be spoken. Not every opinion needs an audience. Not every emotion needs a microphone. Sometimes silence is respect. Sometimes silence is dignity. Sometimes silence is protection. And sometimes silence is everything. This doesn't mean being passive. It means being conscious. It means speaking with awareness, not impulse. It means choosing your words like tools, not weapons. It means honoring the moment with attention, not just expression. So, how do you build this discipline? Start by pausing. Train the gap between stimulus and response. Let your body stay calm while your mind processes. Ask, is this the moment? Is this necessary? Will this add or distract? And if the answer is no, don't say it. Trust the silence. Then when the yes comes, speak. And speak cleanly, directly, with presence. Because timing is not just about silence or speech. It's about honoring the moment. And when you do that, your words become rare. And rare words get remembered. We've all been taught that communication is about words. The right words, the right tone, the right structure. But the most impactful communicators understand something most people miss. That words only tell half the story. The other half is silence. More specifically, the pause. A pause is not the absence of speech. It's the presence of meaning. It's the frame around your words. It's what gives your message space to land. Most people rush through their sentences like they're racing a clock. They feel the need to fill every second with sound, every thought with explanation, every silence with noise. But that's not power. That's panic. True power lives in the pause. Because when you pause, you create focus. You pull the listener in. You give them time to feel what you're saying. You give yourself time to feel it too. And that's when your words transform from mere sound into substance. Think about great speakers, the ones who give chills, the ones who speak with calm, deliberate confidence. What do they all have in common? They pause, and not by accident. They pause to emphasize. They pause to let meaning rise. They pause to shift the energy in the room. And every time they do, it works, because silence activates attention. Here's the paradox. People fear silence in conversation, but they trust those who know how to use it. When you pause, you signal something deep. You're not rushing. You're not overcompensating. You're not trying to impress. You're present, grounded, secure, and people feel that. But how do you use a pause without it feeling awkward? The secret is intention. You don't pause to escape. You pause to deliver. You're not avoiding. You're allowing space, allowing thought, allowing the listener to meet you in the moment. Here are a few powerful ways to use pauses. 1. After a key statement. Say something important, then stop. Let it hang. Let it echo. That silence becomes a spotlight. 2. Before truth. Build anticipation. Let the listener sense that something is coming. They'll lean in without realizing it. 3. During tension. In conflict or emotion, pausing shows control. It slows everything down. It makes people feel safer, heard, held. 4. To replace words. Sometimes you don't need to explain. A pause says, "You felt that, didn't you?" And the listener nods, even if you never said the sentence. The point is this: a pause gives your words power. Without it, your message is one long breath. With it, your message becomes a rhythm. Speech is like music. The silence between the notes is what makes it beautiful. Without pauses, it's just noise. And this works in every conversation. In arguments, a pause stops escalation. In sales, a pause builds curiosity. In relationships, a pause makes space for emotion. In leadership, a pause builds trust. So the next time you speak, don't rush to the end. Give your words a moment to breathe. Let them land. Then pause. Hold it. Let silence say the rest. You'll notice something powerful. People will lean in. They'll wait. They'll reflect. Because you've given them space to feel, not just hear. And in that space, your message lives longer. So remember this. The pause is not the end of your thought. It's the power of it. Use it like a sculptor uses a chisel. Clean, precise, intentional. Because in the space between your words lives your presence. And when you master the pause, you don't just speak with power. You become it. When people think of presence, they often picture someone bold, loud, energetic, someone who dominates the room, takes the spotlight, owns the space with their voice, their hands, their charisma. And yes, that kind of presence exists. But there's another kind, a quieter kind, a deeper kind, the kind of presence that doesn't demand attention, but receives it. You walk into a room, and you don't speak first. You don't rush to be noticed. But people notice you anyway. They feel something. They sense something. A groundedness, a stillness, a self-assured energy that doesn't need to lead, but does anyway. That's commanding presence without commanding the room. It's not about posture or fashion or titles. It's about energy. And the more secure you are within yourself, the less you feel the need to perform. You don't have to talk over people. You don't have to assert your status. You don't need everyone to know who you are, because your very presence says it for you. Let's break this down. True presence begins with internal alignment. When your thoughts, emotions, and body are in sync, people feel it. They may not know why they're drawn to you, but they are, because you're not scattered. You're not trying too hard. You're centered, and that stillness is magnetic. Think of someone you trust deeply. Do they rush? Do they fidget? Do they interrupt? Probably not. They listen. They hold space. They give you their full attention. That's presence. Not noise, not performance, but presence. Now here's the key. People with real presence don't seek approval. They don't scan the room for reactions. They anchor the room instead. Because they're not reacting to the environment, They're shaping it through their stillness, through their attention, through their way of being. Here's what it looks like in real life. You're in a meeting. Others are talking fast, interrupting, pitching, performing. You sit. You listen. You nod once. You speak once, and the room quiets. Why? Because you need the spotlight. You waited for the moment. And when you spoke, it mattered. Not because it was louder, but because it was clean, calm, clear, and more than that, because it came from someone who didn't need to prove anything. Let's get practical. To build this kind of presence, start with your breath. Shallow breath makes you feel rushed, nervous, small. Deep, calm breathing anchors you. It slows everything down. It keeps your nervous system steady. Next, eye contact. Not staring, not intense, just steady, warm, unhurried. When you look at someone without fear or agenda, they feel it. It creates safety, respect, trust. Third, body stillness. Fidgeting leaks presence. Tapping, shifting, bouncing. It tells others you're uncomfortable. Instead, hold your space. Let your body say, I belong here. And finally, listen more than you speak. Not passively, but fully. Listen like it's the most important thing in the world. Because in that listening, you gain something no amount of speaking can give. Connection. People feel seen. And when someone feels seen by you, your presence grows in their mind tenfold. Now, let's talk about how this plays out socially. You don't have to tell stories to be remembered. You don't have to dominate the group to be respected. You don't have to be the center of attention to hold attention. You just have to be there, fully, not distracted, not seeking, not apologizing for your space, just being. And when you do that consistently, people start to feel something around you. They can't always explain it, but it feels like confidence. It feels like peace. It feels like, I can trust this person. That's the real power of presence. Not what you say, not how many people laugh, but how people feel when you're around and after you're gone. So remember, you don't need to take over the room. You don't need to fight for the spotlight. Let your energy speak first. Let your silence hold space. Let your attention shape the room. Because the loudest person isn't always a leader. The one with the clearest energy is. And when you master that, you won't just walk into rooms with confidence. You'll change them without even trying. There's something deeply magnetic about mystery, about restraint, about someone who doesn't reveal everything, doesn't explain themselves, doesn't rush to be understood, but instead speaks little and lets others wonder. That's a form of power most people never tap into, because we've been trained to overshare, to fill silences, to explain every move, to give more details than necessary. We assume the more people know about us, the more they'll like us. But the opposite is often true. Curiosity comes from what's held back, not what's given away. Think of the people who intrigue you the most. Are they the ones constantly posting, constantly talking, constantly explaining? Or are they the ones who speak with purpose, reveal little, and let others fill in the blanks? It's always the second, because our brains are wired for tension, for questions, for the gap between what we know and what we don't. And when someone lives in that gap, we watch, we lean in, we wonder, we want to know more. That's the power of restraint. The less you say, the more attention your words get. The more you pause, the more your presence is felt. The more you hold back, the more others invest energy trying to understand you. And that's what makes you unforgettable. Now, let's be clear, this isn't about manipulation. It's not about withholding to control people. It's about trusting that your value isn't in what you reveal. It's in who you are and how you carry it. When you no longer feel the need to spill every thought, defend every opinion, or prove every accomplishment, you become lighter, calmer, more grounded, and others feel it. Let's make this practical. In conversation, when someone asks you something personal, you don't have to answer immediately. You can smile. You can say, maybe one day, or simply, that's a story for another time. You just opened a loop, and the brain hates open loops. So it keeps thinking about you, wondering, filling in the gaps. This makes people more invested in you. And the best part? It happened silently. You didn't brag. You didn't overshare. You didn't force interest. You simply let curiosity do the work. The less you say, the more they lean in. It's the same in storytelling. You don't start by telling the ending. You reveal just enough to hook them. You build tension. You create pull. That's what you're doing when you practice restraint in your daily presence. You're telling the world, there's more here than you can see. And people remember that. Now here's a deeper truth. Restraint doesn't just create curiosity in others. It creates peace in you because you're no longer addicted to approval. You're no longer leaking energy trying to be liked. You're no longer living on the surface. You're rooted, quietly confident, and people respect what's centered. They trust what isn't desperate to be seen. That's the paradox of silence. When you speak less, you're watched more. When you reveal less, you're remembered more. When you do less, you mean more. So practice holding back, not from fear, but from power. Be the one who doesn't overshare. Be the one who lets curiosity bloom. Be the one who's so deeply comfortable with themselves, they don't need to speak to be felt. And in doing so, you'll discover something rare, that your silence holds a louder echo than most people's noise.